family reunion, and the introduction of soap. When Felix and Lucas decided to make Felix their home, they believed no one on earth would miss them. They were wrong. Their cousin, Peter Perez, did miss them. They were the only members of his family he considered close. So much so that the brothers decided to make him the heir to the house where they had lived with their mother. Now he lived there alone. 15 years had passed since their disappearance. He became obsessed with it. He even kept a newspaper clipping that reported the event. Two brothers, Felix and Lucas Perez, teachers by profession, disappeared in the aforementioned forest reserve. Their vehicle was found on the outskirts of the forest with no signs of violence. They were experts in their hobby of camping, so their disappearance baffled the authorities. Their tent was found intact. However, they and their equipment were not found after an exhaustive search. The report continued, emphasizing how mysterious the disappearance of the two brothers was. The authorities filed this as just another unsolved missing persons report, but not Peter. He became obsessed with finding them. He even visited the scene of their disappearance many times, all to no avail. He made finding them his life's mission. On one of his visits to Earth, Zariel noticed this, and it piqued his curiosity. The spirit continued to visit the young man without his knowledge, just as it had with the two brothers. 15 years had passed, but the young man remained steadfast in his mission. He was now 30 years old. His determination is admirable, Zariel thought to himself. The young man had equipped himself for his search, as much as his financial situation allowed. One night, Zariel decided to appear in his dreams, in his human form. "Hello, Peter. I see you haven't given up trying to find your cousins. Who are you, and what are you doing in my head?" Peter asked suspiciously. "I am what you would call an extraterrestrial spirit," Zariel replied. "I think my relatives were right. I'm going crazy," the man said, worried. "You're not going crazy. I came to bring you good news. Your cousins Felix and Lucas aren't dead. In fact, they're living happily on Zul," Zariel replied, smiling. "Zul? What's that?" the man asked. He decided he was going crazy, but decided to play along with the apparition before him. "It's the name of my world. There, I am the spirit of creation and happiness," Zariel replied, putting on an air of importance. "Is that true? You're saying my cousins have been living in your world all these years?" asked Peter, now not so young. "Please, don't tell anyone about this encounter with me, or they'll really think you're crazy. We'll continue this conversation later. You're about to wake up," the spirit concluded. Peter opened his eyes and sat up in bed, perplexed. Who or what was that? He wondered. He was convinced his cousins were alive, but he was also mentally prepared for the worst. But this was too hard to believe. He'd seen too many animes where the protagonist is transported or reincarnated in another world and acquires special powers. Of course, all of this was just fantasy to relax his mind. He dismissed those thoughts. It wasn't possible. But that dream where this Zariel appeared was the most vivid he'd ever had. He continued his daily routine, doing his boring job as an accounting assistant. It wasn't exciting, but it allowed him to support himself and maintain his personal mission, to find the brothers, or at least find out what had become of them. He didn't know if this Zariel was a figment of his own imagination. Several nights later, Zariel visited him again. "Hello again, Peter. How are you?" Zariel asked, smiling. "Hello. Your name is Zariel, right?" Peter asked. "I'm glad you remember me and don't think I'm just a hallucination," the spirit replied. "Thank you. The last time we spoke, you told me my cousins are living in your world. What do they look like now?" Peter asked. This madness intrigued him, so he decided to give in. "That's easy. This is what Felix looks like now," he said, assuming Felix's appearance, leaving Peter stunned. Felix had always been athletic, but now he looked so muscular he resembled a competitor in a fitness competition. Although a well-groomed beard covered the lower part of his face, his eyes were the same as Peter remembered. "He looks incredible," Peter murmured. "If that impresses you, wait until you see Lucas," Zariel said, taking on Lucas's appearance. Peter's jaw dropped. Lucas looked as muscular as Felix and no longer wore glasses. The slight schoolteacher was gone, replaced by this man who looked like he'd stepped out of a superhero comic strip. "Now you're going to tell me the truth. How did they get to your world?" Peter asked firmly. "They came through a portal I created," Zariel replied. "So you sent them there?" Peter retorted. "Technically, they came on their own," Zariel justified himself. "I suspect you're somewhat Machiavellian. Sadly, both Felix and Lucas think that way about me too. I won't tell you any more. If you want to know the whole story, you'll have to ask them," Zariel replied, feigning offense. You want me to come to your world? The man asked suspiciously. Why not? You've been trying to find them for years. You were willing to do it no matter the risks. Or am I wrong? Very well. You don't have to decide now. I'll give you a week to think about it. If you decide not to go, you'll never see me again. The spirit ended the conversation. Peter woke up, got up, and looked at himself in the mirror, thinking about the entity that appeared in his dreams. Could it be that he was becoming schizophrenic? But the way it presented the image of the two brothers seemed too real. The concept of traveling to another world had always fascinated him. But something about Zariel made him suspicious. What did this spirit, or whatever it was, gain by helping him see his cousins? Assuming that was what it was planning, he kept thinking about it for several days, even while working. Up to this point in his life, his existence had been extremely boring. His mission to find his cousins had consumed all his free time, so he had no social life whatsoever. It was possible that this spirit that said it could take him to his cousins was lying. That saying, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, kept repeating in his mind. But so far, all he had was his house, inherited from his cousins and his aunt, and his job. Zariel was offering him the chance to find his beloved cousins, after years of fruitless searching. Besides, the idea of seeing a completely new world fascinated him. So, on the 7th day, he packed a backpack with camping gear, several cans of food, and an old Smith Wesson with 2 boxes of .38 caliber bullets. As night fell, sleep overtook him, and he saw Zariel's now familiar face. I see you finally decided. I saw you making your preparations for the trip, the spirit said, smiling as always. I think you already knew I was going to say yes, didn't you? Peter blurted out. Yes, you remind me too much of your cousins, stated Zariel. First of all, I have to tell you that the world you're going to is more primitive than this one. Although your cousins have improved everyone's lives there. But there are many dangerous animals there that are already extinct here, and others that never existed here. The people there are quite different. Some look like you, but others are very different. I'm going to create a portal that will take you to the city where your cousins live. There's also the language. It's very different from yours. I won't be able to help you with that without using a lot of power. Anything else? Peter asked impatiently. Yes, don't try to use your gun inside the city, or they'll kill you. The city of Felik is very well guarded. You can still say no, Zariel told him, challengingly, startling Peter a little, but he kept his composure. Very well, I'm ready, he said. Very well, when you wake up, you'll find the portal to my world behind your house. We'll meet in Zul. As Zariel said this, Peter woke up. He got up, made his bed for the last time in that house, brushed his teeth, and washed his face. Then he showered and put on the clothes he wore when he went to the forest where the brothers disappeared. After turning off all the appliances in the house, he went to the back of the house, and there it was, Zariel's portal. What else could it be? After hesitating for a moment, he decided to go through it. On the other side, he was in a dead-end alley. Zariel had chosen that spot to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. When he came out of the alley, he saw a centaur talking amicably with a satyr and a human. They all looked at him strangely, noticing how different his attire looked. They said something to the centaur, and he galloped off. Peter watched him leave, but didn't think much of it. But minutes later, 3 burly men in armor arrived, carrying swords. Peter saw them approaching and instinctively reached for the butt of his pistol. But he remembered Zariel's warning and raised his hands. The guards asked Peter something in a language he didn't understand. Take me to your leader, he said, trying to be funny, a bad habit he'd picked up when he got nervous. The guards tied his hands behind his back and led him away by his elbows. What are these guys going to do to me? He wondered as they walked among them. One of them ran off and disappeared from sight, while another carried his backpack. Felix was at his desk looking at some documents when he saw a guard enter, his breathing somewhat labored. Lord Felix, the soldier explained, we've apprehended a stranger. At first, we thought he was a Gore spy, but he started speaking in a language we've only ever heard from you and Lord Lucas. This intrigued Felix. Bring him to me. He ordered the soldier, who then ran in the opposite direction. The other soldier reached the other soldiers. He said something Pete didn't understand, but he thought he heard Felix's name among the guards' words. No, that's probably the word they use for decapitate, he thought with growing concern as he walked, held up by the guards. Felix was still reading some reports when the guards entered, bringing in the prisoner. He looked up and saw the guards making Peter kneel before him. Cousin Felix, it's me. Peter, the captive said. At first, Felix didn't recognize him, but upon hearing the words in English and the inflection of his voice, he opened his eyes, recognizing him. Little Peter? He finally said, standing up. He ordered the soldiers to release him, and they did, somewhat surprised. Then Peter rushed toward him to hug him, which alarmed the guards, but Felix signaled them with his hand. How did you get here? Then it dawned on him. Oh, I know. It was Zariel, wasn't it? He asked, though he already knew the answer. He told me you and cousin Lucas were here. At first I thought I was going crazy. When he appeared to me at night, he finally convinced me, and here I am. But you look incredible, like you won the Mr. Olympia competition or something, said the ex-prisoner, notably impressed. Oh, that. It's a bit of Zariel's power plus an hour of exercise a day, Felix replied, trying to downplay the matter. Felix ordered a messenger to find Lucas, telling him it was a matter of extreme importance. Lucas hurried over, imagining it was something serious, only to find Felix sitting at his desk as usual, with Peter sitting on the other side. He recognized him immediately. Peter, how did you get here? Oh, right. That was Zariel, wasn't it? Lucas said, realizing it immediately as well. Yes, our favorite spirit up to his trickery, Felix replied. Then Peter threw himself into Lucas's arms. Hey, you're a little too old for that, Lucas said, smiling. You guys look much bigger than me. You look like wrestlers now, Peter said admiringly. Zariel told me you lived happily here, but from what I've seen, you're very important. Everyone treats you like royalty. And there are many creatures here that I have only ever seen in mythology, Peter observed. They were originally Zariel's creations, and they're citizens of Felek, Lucas explained. Felek? You mean you named this city after yourselves? Not us. The people here decided to do that after making us their leaders, Felix defended himself. So, you are kings, Peter replied. They continued talking for hours, the siblings recounting the events since they had crossed through the portal, while Peter listened, fascinated. Then Peter told them about his life since their disappearance. Both, deeply moved, placed a hand on his shoulder and thanked him. Atexa then entered the office to say goodbye, leaving Peter speechless. Hello, Atexa. This is our cousin, Peter. She smiled and extended her hand, which the newcomer took, gently stroking it up and down. Peter nodded, regretting not knowing the language. She said goodbye to everyone and left. She's gorgeous, and that green color makes her look so exotic, Peter said, momentarily forgetting he was being overheard by the two brothers. She belongs to the Aemsis tribe, and she's my assistant, Lucas clarified. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, Peter apologized. Ah, don't worry, Lucas said, smiling mischievously. Tonight you'll stay with me and my family. You only have the clothes on your back, right? Lucas said. You have a family? Peter asked, surprised. Yes. When we get to my house, I'll introduce you to my wife, Neras, and my sons, Castor and Pollux, Lucas replied. And in the next few days, I'll introduce you to my wife, Olia, and my son, Felix, Felix chimed in. So you're the kings of a country, and you already have families. I feel so insignificant next to you, Peter said, somewhat depressed. Come on, this isn't a competition. Here in Felek, everyone does their part, Lucas replied. Upon approaching Lucas's house, Peter was impressed by how functional everything was. Suddenly, a large, dark shadow emerged from the undergrowth and placed its paws on Lucas's chest, licking his face. I told you not to do that, proud. The wolf noticed Peter's presence and bared its teeth, growling at him, frightening Peter. This is a giant wolf. And is it your pet? Peter asked, surprised. Actually, it's my son Castor's pet, and that one over there is my son Pollux's pet. His name is Loyal. They raised them from puppies. Proud, this is Peter. He's going to live with us from now on, Lucas told the enormous canine. The wolf dropped his aggressive stance and sat down. Come on, let him sniff your hand. He's basically a big dog. Yeah, a big dog that could bite my head off, the man thought as he extended his limp hand toward the Rixo. The Proud sniffed it and then began to lick it. I think he likes you, Lucas said, making Peter breathe a sigh of relief. He did the same with Loyal, who approached. Loyal is Pollux's pet, Lucas said, pointing to the other Rixo. You don't happen to have a dragon behind your house, do you? The man asked, incredulous. Oh no, the dragons around here are too ferocious, they call them Yoken here. Although it would be interesting to try and tame one, Lucas said, amused. When they arrived at the house, Lucas opened the door and they both went inside. Neres was in the living room reading a book. She looked up and smiled. "Hello, my love," she said sweetly, as Lucas kissed her on the lips. Meanwhile, Peter was thinking, are there no ugly women in this world? Neres then noticed Peter's presence. "Who is your guest?" she asked. "This is my cousin Peter. He arrived this morning through a portal created by Zariel. He'll be living here for a while. He doesn't speak the local language, so you'll have to be patient with him," Lucas explained. Still seated, she extended her hand to Peter, who took it. The grip she gave him seemed too firm for a woman. Peter's hands, unaccustomed to physical labor, were soft. He, however, felt the calluses on her hands. "Do she works in agriculture?" Then she put the book aside, but not before marking the page with a quill pen. At that moment, Castor and Pollux arrived. "Who is this man, Dad?" Castor asked, noticing Peter's presence. "I want you to meet your cousin Peter. He just arrived from our world," Lucas replied. The boys then tried to speak in the limited English Lucas had tried to teach them. "Welcome, cousin," they said, and both hugged him. It made him feel somewhat self-conscious, but also happy. Knowing that his cousins were not only alive, but living happy lives with their families was more than he had ever imagined. Afterward, they all sat down at the table to eat their meal as a family. All these dishes were unfamiliar to Peter, but when he tasted them, he found them delicious. They continued talking for several hours until it was time for bed. Lucas took Peter to a room with a small bed, which he had designated as the guest room. When Peter lay down to try to fall asleep, he felt a warm sensation throughout his body. He thought he was feverish, but he was so tired that he eventually drifted off. That night, Zariel appeared to him once more. "Hello, Peter, I brought you to see your cousins, as promised. What do you think of them?" Zariel said with a smile that seemed to say, "I know more than you think." "Very well, you beat me to it. What should I do now?" the newcomer asked. "That will be your decision. You can join in helping others here, or you can return to your world, because this one is, compared to yours, rather primitive. Life here is much harder than it was back there. But once you go back through the portal to your world, you'll never see me again," Zariel promised. "Are you kidding? Why would I want to go back there? Living in a world populated by mythical creatures, with my two favorite cousins here? No, as hard as life is here, I prefer it," Peter said vehemently. "I wonder if a certain assistant you met today had anything to do with that decision," said a female voice beside Zariel. "I want to introduce you to my sister, Lumiel. The spirit of love," Zariel said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "All right, you got me. I am interested in her. But this world is much more interesting than the one I left behind, no matter how much technology it has. Although I'm going to have trouble with the language," Peter replied. "I can help you with that. There's another city south of Felik. It's called Loomis. The administrator there is very skilled at channeling my power. His name is Alios. He can channel my knowledge of the local language into your brain. That's how your cousins learned the Zulish language after they arrived here. It will take a lot of my power, but you'll have that knowledge to use to help others. The good thing is that I feed on the energy that comes from happiness, so I'll recover soon. By the way, you felt something strange when you lay down, didn't you?" the spirit explained. "Yes, something warm all over my body. By the way, I gather that if you feed on the energy of happiness, your sister feeds on the energy of love. Am I wrong?" Peter said, smiling triumphantly. "That's right. You're as clever as your cousins. By the way, that warmth you felt was my power making improvements to your body. I don't do that with just anyone, but I feel that you will be just as important as your cousins in saving Felik from destruction," Zariel remarked. "Destruction? Is there something you're not telling me?" Peter asked, intrigued. "I'll let your cousins fill you in on everything. I'll just say that things here aren't as peaceful as they seem. You're about to wake up. Until next time." The spirits waved goodbye. Peter woke up. Pollux was there, rubbing his shoulder. "Breakfast, Cousin Peter," he said in his limited English. Breakfast was berries and some meat he couldn't identify, but he was hungry. "Where do I wash?" he asked Pollux, who replied, "In here," pointing to the bathroom. It was a replica of the ones they had found in the city of Loomis. Of course, Peter knew nothing about this. He went to his backpack, took out his toothbrush and toothpaste, and went to the bathroom, looking around. Aren't there any parasites in the water coming out of this pump? He wondered as he pumped to fill the container. Well, if the whole family drank from here, he didn't think there would be a problem. He brushed his teeth and rinsed his mouth and face. Then he heard shouts coming from the backyard. There were Lucas and Neres, deep in a sparring session with wooden swords. He could see Neres's agility as she dodged Lucas's attacks, and the acrobatic way she moved without letting go of her sword. This woman is dangerous, but Lucas is no slouch either. After 50 minutes, they stopped and bowed to each other. The twins had had their own practice and were also sweaty. Each of them grabbed their own clothes and towels and headed toward a nearby cave. 15 minutes later, they returned in their new clothes. If you want, you can bathe there. The water is surprisingly clean and warm. You can use one of the boys' clothes, Lucas told him. Peter did exactly as Lucas recommended. On the way, Peter decided to tell Lucas about his conversation with Zariel the night before. Oh, I see. Yes, that's how we learned to speak Zilish. But I don't understand what Zariel meant by me helping to save Felek from destruction, Peter replied. Ah, that. Don't be alarmed. But there's a reptilian race that has decided to exterminate or enslave other races. They're being manipulated by two of Zariel's brothers, named Chill and Yufril. Just as Zariel feeds on the energy of happiness, Chill feeds on the energy of hatred, and Yufril feeds on the energy of anger, Lucas explained. What strange beings, Peter replied. Actually, there are 14 spirits. 7 feed on feelings that are like the 7 deadly sins, and 7 feed on positive feelings. And yes, I find them strange too. Lucas answered. What is this reptilian race like? They call themselves the Gors. They are divided into 3 races according to their hierarchy. Zariel's brothers have convinced them that they should rule this world. That's why everyone in Felek is preparing for war against them. The entire population has to receive at least basic training, with a few exceptions. We are also producing weapons, and in Loomis we have more allies, like the Telera, the Vinfos, and the Liders. Lucas continued explaining. Who are they? Peter asked, intrigued. Well, the Telera could be described as blonde elves. There are elves here too? The young man asked, now even more interested. My theory is that races from this world passed through portals created by Zariel and his brothers thousands of years ago, giving rise to the ancient legends and, more recently, the cryptid stories. Some of the races here might seem scary at first, but they are very friendly once you get to know them. Okay, we're getting off topic. Vinfos are what you'd call mermaids. And as for the Liders, remember the stories of the Mothman? They're very dangerous if you provoke them, but they're much friendlier than they seem. Lucas concluded. We're going to have the morning meeting, and you'll see what I mean with your own eyes, he added. Later, everyone arrived in the city. The boys went to school, while Lucas and Peter went to Peter's office. Felix had decided to personally oversee the training of the new recruits, while Lucas went straight to the conference room, and Peter looked at chairs of different sizes. Lucas sat in his assigned place and indicated to Peter that he should sit in a normal-sized chair at a corner, pulled back from the table. First, Aronise arrived. Good morning, Lord Lucas. Then he saw Peter sitting down. Who is he? Asked the elderly judge. He's my cousin Peter. Peter waved, smiling. Aronise waved back and sat down. He thought he would hear an interesting story later. After Aronise, Rados appeared and sat down, also noticing Peter. The object of their gazes thought. So this is a giant. Then Deslet arrived. A centaur, but bigger than the one I saw before. Incredible. Then Natalie's arrived. I have no idea what that small, hairy creature is, thought Peter, who wasn't as knowledgeable about cryptids and mythical creatures as Lucas. Then Ixtales arrived. I know that, a minotaur. After him came Telendi, who had decided to stay in Felek as a sort of ambassador. A blonde elf. This world is becoming more and more interesting to me, Peter thought to himself. The meeting proceeded normally, and of course Peter didn't understand a word of what was being discussed. But Peter was fascinated watching them interact with each other, arguing and making emphatic and descriptive gestures. Then Felix made the announcement. I want to introduce you to my cousin Peter. He arrived yesterday morning through one of Zariel's portals. Really, Lord Lucas? Yes, it's true, Lord Telendi. He still can't speak Zilish, so I have to take him to Aelios in Loomis so he can give him the same treatment he gave my brother and me, Felix explained. But he looks so weak compared to you, said the Telera leader. Yes, he led a sedentary life in our world, but we're going to remedy that here, Lucas concluded. A couple of days later, preparations for the journey began. They would use 2 carriages reminiscent of the old stagecoaches used in the American West. Unfortunately, the journey will take 3 days, and that's because the roads are better now than before. I spoke with Neras beforehand, so she won't be waiting for us tonight. The escort included several knights, Amazons, and Terrets. The journey was uneventful, and 3 days later they arrived. Although they had made stops to rest, Peter felt tired. When they got out of the carriage, Aelios came out to greet them. "Good morning, my lord Lucas." "Welcome," Aelios said with a bow. "Hello, Aelios. I want to introduce you to my cousin, Peter," Lucas replied. Aelios looked at Peter, who waved. "Your cousin?" Aelios said, astonished. "He came from our world several days ago through one of Zariel's portals. I want you to do with him what you did with us when we first came through the portal 15 years ago," Lucas explained. "Oh, I see. Although I've become better at channeling Zariel's power, I haven't done that again," the Loomis administrator replied. "Can you? Or you cannot?" Lucas asked. "Yes, but I need to prepare." "Very well. Take your time. We don't want this to go wrong, Aelios," Lucas replied. After meditating and preparing himself, Aelios took his staff, which he hadn't used in a long time, and approached Peter, who was sitting and somewhat nervous. "Don't worry, Pete. Aelios knows what he's doing. He gave us the same treatment 15 years ago. You might sleep for a couple of days while your brain adjusts." "Very well. If you trust him, then so do I," Peter replied. At that moment, Aelios murmured a few words, not because they held any power, but because they helped him focus his concentration. Then a bright orb seemed to emerge from the stone of the staff and enter Peter's forehead. His eyes rolled back, then he lost consciousness. 2 days later, Peter opened his eyes. "How are you feeling, Lord Peter?" Aelios asked. Peter was surprised to hear and understand those words. "I'm fine, mister Aelios," Peter replied, savoring the words in the language that had seemed so foreign to him just 2 days before. "This is incredible," he said to himself, but Aelios heard him. "Oh no, it isn't. I've been training to channel Zariel's power since I was very young," the administrator of Loomis replied. Just then, Lexa arrived, and Aelios took her in his arms. Peter stared at her. "She reminds me of Atexa," the patient commented, still in bed. "Ah, that's because she's my sister," Lexa replied. "It's nice to meet you, Miss or Mrs. Lexa." Peter tried to correct himself. "It's Mrs. Mine," Aelios replied. "Oh, please excuse me," Peter apologized. "Don't worry, Lord Peter. We all make mistakes," Aelios replied. "And considering that all this is new to you, it's natural," Aelios responded sympathetically. "Why do you call me Lord, Mr. Aelios?" Peter asked, intrigued. "Why shouldn't I? You are Lords Felix and Lucas' cousin, and I feel Zariel's power on you," was Aelios' answer. At that moment, Lucas appeared in the doorway. "I see the, shall we say, treatment worked," Lucas said, smiling. "That's right, Cousin Lucas. Now I understand the language here," Peter said proudly. "Very good. As soon as we return to Felix, your training begins," Lucas instructed. This puzzled Peter. "Training?" Peter asked, surprised. "Yes. You'll have to learn to read and write Zulish. You'll also have to train your body. First with exercises to strengthen your body, and then combat training. This world is very dangerous, and you have to learn to fend for yourself. You have to know how to use a sword, a spear, and how to shoot a bow and a crossbow. You'll have to learn karate. You'll also have to learn to ride a horse. In time, you'll also be able to use firearms. Like Dorothy said in The Wizard of Oz, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto," Lucas remarked, smiling. "Is that because of the Gors?" Peter asked, sounding worried. "Not just them, Peter. There are creatures here that would give you nightmares. Like giant scorpions called Kilzes, giant spiders called Slarinas, giant praying mantises called Phalionas, and giant venomous lizards called Larkins. And that's just to name a few. Oh, by the way, not all the Rixos are as friendly as proud or loyal. So you have to learn how to defend yourself against them. Ideally, you'd never run into one, but you never know. My boys had a close encounter with a Larkon. Now that you can talk to them, ask them. Any of the ones I mentioned could make you their lunch. Not to mention that on the other continent called Cater, there are dinosaurs," Lucas said, his expression now much more serious. Peter realized that life there would be much harder than he had imagined, but he had already made his decision. There was no going back. This was his new home. He would have to work harder than he ever had before. But if Lucas could do it, so could he. The return journey was uneventful, thanks to the well-guarded road between the two towns, apart from the relay stations for the riders carrying the mailbags. Arriving quite late in the afternoon, they decided to return home. There wasn't much to do there, so Lucas brought a chessboard and placed it on the dining room table. "Don't tell me you have chess here too?" Peter asked, smiling. "Well, we didn't until about a year ago. I decided to introduce this and other games. But no matter how many times I told them they were not my invention, They all think they were, Lucas lamented. It doesn't surprise me, Peter concluded. Seeing a game that you introduced for the first time, of course they'll think you invented it. The same thing has happened with all the innovations I've introduced over the years. Everyone thinks I'm a genius inventor, and I'm neither one nor the other. Lucas complained again. You shouldn't be so hard on yourself. You've helped them, and they admire you for it. Peter said, placing his hand on Lucas's shoulder. Why don't we play a game of chess while everyone arrives? When the rest of the family arrived, the two were still engrossed in their first game. I see you're having fun with that game. I need to practice more to beat you. Lucas, said Neris. Castor and Pollux stood on either side of the table to watch the cousins' moves. Can we take a break here? I want to help Neris with the food, said Lucas. Very well, Lucas, replied Peter. Later, they all ate, discussing the day's events. Peter no longer felt isolated from the conversation, as he now understood everything that was being said. By the way, Peter, your physical training starts tomorrow. Will you do it? Lucas told him in Zolish. Castor, could you help me train Cousin Peter to get stronger? No combat for now. I just want you to make him stronger, Lucas explained. I'll help Cousin Peter as much as I can, Dad. I want to help too. Pollux interrupted. Very well. You'll help him for an hour a day without neglecting your own training. Boys, Lucas said, feigning sternness. Once they had eaten, they continued talking for an hour and a half, then decided to retire to rest. Peter decided to leave the board as it was to continue the game the next day. The next day arrived, but instead of having breakfast with Lucas's two sons after he washed up, they took him outside and put him through 3 sets of different exercises to strengthen his body. Although he found them difficult because of the number of repetitions, it was much easier than the last time he had tried to establish an exercise routine. Whatever Zariel did to me is working. I wonder if in a year or two my body will be as muscular as the cousins, Peter thought to himself. After an hour, he was exhausted, and the boys let him go. Peter took a shower using the pump to spray himself with water. It was Saturday, or as they would call it in Felek, Laville. The whole family was free from their obligations except for Lucas, who turned to Peter. Now that you've finished your physical training for today, you're going to start your mental training, Lucas told him. How so? The guest asked curiously. Yes, even though you now know the spoken Zalese language, you don't know how to read or write it. We're going to the center of Felek. Although you're a bit old for school, we have a system for adult literacy, Lucas explained. Very well. I'll have to learn to read and write again, Peter said with a sigh. Don't worry. I don't think it will give you any trouble. I designed this system based on our alphabet. It's much easier to learn than the old writing system here. Only a few people know that system. In fact, they helped me develop the new method. They headed to the city, and when they arrived, they went to a smaller building. There were several adults of various races there. They all wanted to learn how to better navigate society. When Lucas entered, they all bowed. Don't worry about me, Lucas said, showing the palms of his hands. I only came to bring Peter here. Peter took a seat. Lucas said goodbye to everyone and went to his office. Then, those present began to ask him questions. How long have you known Lord Lucas? One of them asked admiringly. Since I was a child, Peter replied somewhat shyly. He was about to say something else when Atexa entered the classroom. Good morning, everyone, she said with that captivating smile. Peter couldn't believe his luck. He was going to spend several hours learning directly from her. Hello, mister. Peter, Lord Lucas already informed me that you can now speak our language. The class proceeded normally. She explained the grammar of the Zalese language. Since Peter was familiar with the Western alphabet, he found it easier than the others to apply himself to reading, although pronunciation still gave him some trouble. Atexa was impressed by how quickly Peter absorbed the knowledge. Of course, she was aware of the purpose of Lucas's trip with Peter to Loomis. For his part, Peter was delighted that Atexa was teaching the class. Although he was impressed by Lucas's design of a writing system adapted to Zalese, then he remembered that Lucas had been a teacher. Once the class was over, all the students left the room. Peter decided to stay behind, so he'd have an excuse to talk to the young woman. She noticed his interest in her, so she invited him for tea. Peter was surprised by how easygoing she was. Later, they were both sitting at a table outside a restaurant. This tea is very good, Peter commented. It's Jaina tea, Atexa replied. Please tell me, how did you meet my cousins? Peter asked with genuine curiosity. That was some years ago, after my tribe was saved from slavery of the Achaeans by Lords Felix and Lucas. They took us here to recover from malnutrition. Of course, the Achaeans are now friends. Well, many in my tribe, including my parents and me, decided to stay in Felik. After some time living here, Lord Lucas introduced his reading and writing system in Zulish, and I was one of the first to take those classes taught directly by him. 6 months later, he asked if I wanted to be his assistant, teaching others, and said he would give me a salary. Atexa recounted with a touch of nostalgia. So, besides being beautiful, you're also very intelligent. Peter replied. Not so much, she said modestly. Very well, I've told you about myself. Now tell me about yourself. The woman countered. Please, call me Peter. The man asked. Very well, Peter. Tell me about yourself. She asked again. Well, Felix and Lucas were always my favorite cousins, and their mother treated me better than mine. The last time they spoke to me, they said they were going on a hike in a forest in Indiana. It was a place very far from home. This seemed strange to me, but I couldn't go with them because I was still working my summer job. Then they disappeared, and several months later, I saw the authorities give up the search. So I decided I would be the one to find them. Peter explained as Atexa listened, fascinated. When I turned 18, I went to that place many times without finding them. Then I received a letter saying my cousins were naming me heir to their house. That allowed me to distance myself from my parents, who were already starting to tell me that I was crazy for not giving up my search. Once I moved into the house that was now mine, I tried to look for clues, but I found nothing. Years passed, and I divided my time between my search and my job. Peter continued. And what kind of job did you do? The young woman asked. I worked in an accounting office, basically calculating expenses and income, he replied. When you finish your reading and writing classes, you'll be very useful to Felik, Atexa predicted. What do you mean by that? The man asked, intrigued. Oh, just concentrate on your classes, and we'll talk about it later, she said, smiling enigmatically. The classes continued for several months, and Peter's training became more intense. It included sword and spear fighting, as well as archery and crossbows. I see you've progressed a lot. You're stronger, more agile, and you're developing a strategic mind, Lucas told him. Even so, I'm not as strong as you. Don't worry. We've been here for 15 years and have participated in several battles. But I've seen you practicing with the boys. You are making progress. Your time will come, Lucas replied, placing a hand on Peter's shoulder. That's what worries me, having to fight and kill. I understand. In all the battles we've been in, we've always tried to avoid casualties on both sides. This has led former enemies to decide to join us, Lucas explained. I think it's time to get you a new master. I asked Lord Talindi if he would be willing to train you as a favor to me, and he agreed. Lucas said, smiling. Why is that? I've noticed that karate doesn't seem very compatible with your fighting style. I think kung fu would be more appropriate for you, Lucas explained. You're saying Els practice kung fu? Peter asked, scratching his head. Well, Lumiel, Zariel's little sister, studied it in China and Hong Kong and taught it to them, Lucas replied. Those spirits never cease to amaze me, Peter said, putting his hand to his head. True, but speaking of surprises, Atexa wants to talk to you. Stop by my office later, Lucas said. Later, Peter entered Lucas's office, even though Lucas wasn't there at the moment. Hello, Peter. Atexa greeted him with her best smile, making him happy but a little nervous. She found Peter's shyness amusing, yet also intriguing. Very well, I want to introduce you to someone. She led him to another building in the government complex. They entered, and there was an elderly human and an Achaean engrossed in calculations using abacuses. Good morning, Mr. Talidus, Atexa greeted him. The old man looked up. Greetings, Miss Atexa. What brings you here? I want to introduce you to Mr. Peter. Peter? What an odd name, the old man remarked. It's because he's a cousin of Lords Felix and Lucas. He arrived a few months ago. He might be able to help you with the tax calculations, Atexa replied. So this is what you were planning, Atexa, Peter concluded. Of course, all the innovations Felix and Lucas have introduced have been revolutionary. I suspect your knowledge will help them and, in turn, our nation, was Atexa's reply. Please show me the accounts. Both Talidus and Zumel, which was the name of the Achaean, reluctantly showed them the documents, due to their skepticism. They showed him separate sheets of accounts payable, accounts receivable, and income. Why don't we put all this information on a single page? Do you have paper and a pen? They provided them, and with the help of a piece of wood, he created a double entry form where he recorded the values. If all the information is on a single page, it will be easier to calculate, and it will be easier to track the transactions. Peter explained. Toletus ran a hand through his beard, lost in thought. Where did you learn this system? The accountant asked, intrigued. This method was invented centuries ago by a mathematician named Luca Pacioli. Oh, another Lucas. Now I understand, Zummel remarked. Well, this one has no relation to our Lucas, Peter replied. Very well, we'll have to visit the printing press to make copies of these forms, Peter added. Days later, they had the new system up and running, but they would need more help transferring all the information to the new format. This would streamline all transactions from then on. Peter had grown accustomed to using the abacus, since he didn't have access to calculators or computers, and writing with a quill pen and inkwell also felt different to him. He always used more ink than necessary until he finally mastered the technique. While Atexa was informing him of Peter's progress, barely able to contain her admiration, she said, "He introduced a revolutionary system of accounting." "It doesn't surprise me," Lucas explained. "That was the work he did in our world. The things I've introduced here have been used for centuries there. But now, practically all the work done there is done by machines whose workings I don't understand. I'd love to see that world with my own eyes," Atexa replied. "That's not a good idea," Lucas continued. "Even though knowledge is more advanced than here, there are also many wars between humans for resources and for ideology. Neither Felix nor I were ever happy there. Here, although life is simpler, I prefer it," Lucas stated. "But tell me, how did you come up with the idea of sending Peter to Toletus?" Lucas asked. "Well, we've had many conversations after class, over tea. I realized he's just as intelligent as you," the young woman replied, blushing. Lucas smiled mischievously. "So you're interested in him, aren't you?" "Oh, please don't tell him," Atexa pleaded. "Oh, don't worry. I think he's very interested in you too. Don't tell him I told you," Lucas replied. Hearing this from Lucas, the young woman blushed even more, but smiled with relief. The next morning, Peter was learning Kung Fu under Talendi's tutelage. "Do everything I do, Lord Peter." "I will, Sifu Talendi," Peter replied. "Sifu?" Talendi asked, intrigued. "It's a title given to a Kung Fu master who is experienced and respected in my world. I didn't know that, and I've been practicing it for 50 years. Here, we call him a guide, but Sifu sounds better. And considering that our fighting art comes from your world, perhaps we should adopt that title. I'll consult with the other elders, but let's get back to your training," Talendi replied. "Since I am your disciple, perhaps you shouldn't address me formally," Peter stated. And so Peter continued to be instructed by the old Telera. Later, after finishing his day at the tax office, Peter returned to Lucas's house. Of course, he was being well paid for his work. He thought that soon he might be able to get his own place. But that was still in the future. He still had a lot to learn. It was dinner time, so he sat down with the family. After all, he was hungry. The conversation during dinner flowed naturally. They talked about many things, but then the topic of the bathroom came up. "Hey, Lucas, why isn't there any soap here?" Peter asked, simply out of curiosity. "The truth is, I don't know how to make soap," Lucas replied. "I once saw a video about how it's done, and in the video, it looked quite easy. First, you have to make lye from hardwood ash, and then you mix it with oil or animal fat to give it the solid consistency that soap has," Peter explained. "We're free tomorrow. It's Zerial's day. Please, I want to get some soap in here. I don't feel very clean bathing with herbs," Lucas replied. "All right, Lucas, we'll make some tomorrow. I only saw how it's done. I've never tried to make it myself," Peter replied. "No problem. If you know the process, it's just a matter of experimenting," Lucas replied. The next day, after breakfast, Lucas took Peter to a shed. "All right, we're going to need several containers, something to act as a filter, some oil, and molds." Lucas and Peter decided to burn hardwood in a bonfire with wood they had collected themselves. After waiting several hours for the wood to burn completely, they let it cool. Then they put the ashes in a container, and Peter began stirring the mixture of water and ashes with his hand for 2 hours. Next, they filtered the ashes through another container and another, until most of the ashes had been filtered out, leaving lye. Now, put the oil in the container and slowly pour in the lye. If I remember correctly, the chemical reaction produces a toxic gas. We have to avoid breathing it. We need to stir it for an hour or two, Peter explained. "Very well. Now that it has the color of soap, it should be left in the molds for 24 hours, Peter continued. "If this experiment works, you'll introduce soap into Felix. We'll see." The next morning they went to see the fruit of their labors, and there it was, soap in its solid state. With a small knife, Peter removed the soap from the mold. Very well, I'm going to train with Sifu Telendi, Peter said, taking his leave. So you call him Sifu? Yes. I explained to him where the word came from, and he liked it. Peter replied. Once Peter finished his training with the Telera elder, he bowed to him. He was sweaty and eager to try the soap he had made with Lucas's help. Upon reaching the shed, he took the bar of soap he had extracted earlier and headed for the house. He went inside. No one was home, but Lucas had given him a key. He began pumping water into the tub until there was enough for a bath. I was cold, but he was used to it. Once he finished, he grabbed a towel and dried himself. Minutes later, he had a change of clean clothes. Soap making had definitely been a success. Peter went to the tax office, where Teletus and Zummel were busy filling out the newly printed forms. They greeted him and returned to their task. With Lucas and Felix's permission, they had begun transferring the information to the new forms. There was already an alphabetical filing system in place, and the new double-entry system had reduced paper usage to a third of it used before. At that moment, Atexa entered. Good morning, gentlemen. Teletus, Zummel, and Peter. What brings you here, Miss Atexa? Asked the elderly accountant. Oh, I need to borrow Mr. Peter for the rest of the day. Lord Lucas needs him for another project, the young woman replied. Very well, but we'll need him in the coming days, Teletus responded. All right, it will only be for today and tomorrow. Very well, I'll follow you, said Peter. When they arrived at Lucas's office, there was a much older man there, one Peter had never seen before. Hello, Peter, this is Dempterus. He's been the tanner here since before Felic was founded. Lucas began. Nice to meet you, Mr. Dempterus, replied said Peter. I want you to show him and his son the soap-making process. If all goes well, he and his family will start soap production on a larger scale. After that, you can go back to your paperwork, if that's what you want, Lucas stated. Very well. I see you brought a bar here, Peter said, pointing to the one on Lucas's desk. Peter spent the next 2 days showing Dempterus and his son Demetres the entire process. First, the making of lye, and then the rest of the soap-making procedure. Very well, Peter explained. You can use different kinds of oil or animal fat to make this. Depending on the type of oil or fat used, the soap will have different effects on the skin, Peter explained. Continue on episode 12.